So, now we're going to talk about migrating. I forgot to update this slide. I updated all the other slides because this is a recurring topic. It's just that nowadays it's updating to 14 instead of updating to 10. So, sorry about that. But otherwise, nothing special here. My name is Leif. If you encounter me, then you probably encounter me by me commenting on one of the tickets you're doing. So that's kind of what I do. But for real, I call myself a or the product architect. It's me who has been, like all the things Sven talked about in the morning, that was kind of, I was envisioning those things 5 years ago, and then last year it actually came true. And again, those things that I think of at the office today, that's something that you might see again in maybe next year, maybe in 3 years. I don't know exactly, but that's kind of what I do. I've been around since version 6.6, and well, that's about that. I guess you're all quite stiff, so to get you to move a little bit, let's have some hand-raising exercises. Please wait until I ask the question. So let's first check Vaadin versions. Who is using Vaadin 7 or older? That's a bunch of you. Vaadin 8? Almost everyone. 10 to 13? Couple. 14? Few more. All right, so mostly 8. A couple, or mostly 8 or 7, but quite few of you have also dared to go to, so to say, the new generation with web components. What about browsers? Anyone need to support anything older than Internet Explorer 11? One who almost dares to confess, but not really. Okay, how many need to support IE11? Couple, 5, 10-ish, yeah. And then the rest of you, it's just, so to say, modern browsers and everything is awesome for you. Well done. One last number I want to know. Java versions. So who still runs, let's say, runs stuff in production on Java 7 or older? Nobody. Java 9 or newer? 3 persons. So then assume rest of you are using Java 8 as the primary production environment. All right. No surprises there, but still good to verify. So what we're going to talk about today, first, should you really migrate? Or should you just avoid it? That's kind of the first question always. And then if you decide that, okay, yes, let's migrate our application to Vaadin 14, then how should you do it? 2 different approaches there. One that I call big bang migration, doing everything at once, and then the other, which is to do things incrementally, kind of step by step. And one thing I want to emphasize here is that there isn't any right answer. It really, really, really depends on your situation, on your context. So I'm just trying to give you all the background information. I will probably go way over time here, but it's all right because the next thing is lunch, and that doesn't start, it's not so tight with lunch, I guess. But yeah, that's about that. So let's jump into, should you really migrate? When should you migrate? Should you do it right away? Should you maybe wait a year? Should you wait 5 years? Again, it all depends. To be able to even think about this, you first need to kind of ask yourselves, why should you migrate? Or maybe again, should you avoid it? Because the thing is, when you spend time, whatever you're migrating, you're not adding any business value. You're not making anything directly better for your company. Of course, things will be smoother in the future and you are more like prepare for the future and so on, but still, if you can avoid it, like if you have some application that you know that it will be completely deprecated, it will be renewed with a completely different tech stack because companies merging or whatever, if you have that kind of situation, of course you shouldn't migrate. It's kind of obvious, but I still want to mention it. But then when you should migrate, one reason is, of course, like I kind of implied already, to actually use modern stuff, modern HTML, modern JavaScript, modern CSS, because that's what the web is about. That's what will work best in modern web browsers. And gradually, browsers are quite good with the backwards compatibility stuff, but still, eventually things will probably not work as well if you're not doing things in a modern way. Another reason is, of course, all these web components, kind of as Sven also was talking about, like you have a huge pile like on this webcomponents.org, which is a quite popular registry for web components, just reusable things that you can use. There's like 2,000 components listed today, and you can basically take any of those and use them in your Vaadin 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 application. Whereas if you want to do the same in Vaadin 7 or 8, that would require slightly more work. Then also we have renewed our component set, much more like mobile first thinking, much more responsiveness, all those kinds of things. So for instance, I'm really proud of our date picker. Like, yes, it pops up there on the desktop, but then on a mobile device instead gets kind of this full screen mode, so dims out the things behind it, and it's really scroll optimized and so on. So that's definitely one reason to update, because the new component set, it's just purely better. I'm not objective at all. Then also, if there's something that we might be developing that you are still waiting for, then that will probably not be available for the older versions. So right now, Vaadin 14 is the version that gets all the new features, all the improvements that we're working on, basically. So that's also something to keep in mind. But still, at the same time, 8 is a really great version. I know because I made it. It's true. Well, I had some help, but still. So yeah, 8 is really great. And actually, before we talk about 8, let's talk about 7 a little bit, because 7 is a little bit problematic. Public support for Vaadin 7 ended the beginning of this year. So after this, we say that unfortunately we just have to draw the line. We supported it. We said we should support it for 5 years, and then we saw that very many were still using it. So we actually gave you 1 extra year to get away from Vaadin 7 to actually go to Vaadin 8, because getting from 7 to 8 is relatively easy because we have this kind of full migration layer there. You can keep using all the Vaadin 7 components. So there's some things that may cause problems, but still it's quite smooth. So if you really cannot get away from 7 I mean, then there is this thing called extended support. So you basically pay us, you pay penalty for still using the old version. So you're not completely lost, but it's not that fun either. Then when we talk about Vaadin 8, we're still committed to support it at least until February 2022. So that's like a little bit over 2 years still to come. So you have plenty of time still with Vaadin 8. No hurry at all there. What we're doing with Vaadin 8 is we are mostly just fixing bugs. We are every now and then, Olli and his colleagues, some customer has some specific small things, some enhancement that they want to do, and then Olli and his colleagues in the is it called the support team, expert team nowadays, expertise team? Yes, they can help you with building those, and then we also, if you want to, we publish those as parts of 8 so that you can get them. But in general, we're just reacting whenever someone says something, but we don't have any big roadmap or anything. We are doing, as long as we have any new features to release, we try to do a new release. Last Wednesday, or the first month of each quarter, which gives you these dates, except that 8.10 should have been out already like a month ago, but for some tactical reasons we are slightly late, but we still try to stick to this schedule to like regularly just whatever is done, we release it, and then we go on with the next one. Then we have this guy, yet another reason for kind of making you understand that Vaadin 8 is still great, because this is Java 8. This is the percentage of Vaadin users based on our stats who are currently using Java 8. And I would say that if Java 8 is fine for you, then Vaadin 8 is also fine for you, because they are kind of in the same point in their life cycle. It's also the same, like Oracle has said that by this and this date we won't give any public support for Java 8 anymore, and you won't get any new features, but it's a really solid release. It has, in many cases, it has all you need. If you still cannot make up your mind based on this, then I would also say that we have consultants who are really specialized in just analyzing your code base, looking at what are all the add-ons you're using. They actually have automatic tools that just pull lots and lots of data out of it, and based on that they can almost just give you one number saying how difficult would it be to migrate. That's of course not exactly the truth, but thereabout. So you can talk with any sales guy, and they will be really happy to help you with getting a migration assessment done for your application. So that was that. Should you migrate? Should you not? I don't know. I can just help give you the information. There are good reasons to still keep using 8. If you're using 7, then it's kind of getting time to get there. But if you're on 8, then you're still good to go for several years. But otherwise, there are also, like, if you want new features, if you want to use web components, better integration with front-end JavaScript stuff and so on, then you should consider migrating, definitely. Then let's talk about big bang migration. So this is kind of the first strategy for how to actually get from Vaadin 8 to Vaadin 14. And the idea here is just kind of say that let's get it done, and then you get it done. If you look at it really, comparing really basic code example between Vaadin 8 and Vaadin 14, you will see that it's almost the same. The only difference is that for some reason set caption has been renamed to set text in the button, and then add component has been shortened to just add. And otherwise, just based on this example, it's a no-brainer to migrate. In practice, is of course a little bit more details to take care of. And speaking of practice, I would also really recommend that you practice first. You take some smaller application, maybe just some hobby project or something, and try it out, or the whole migration. So because based on that, you will much better understand like what are the things to look out for, so that you can actually start going in a sensible direction when you actually start with your big migration once you're ready. So let's have a look at what are the big bang steps for migrating. This is a really simplified application, but this is kind of the structure. Did I say I'm an architect? I'm allowed to make these kinds of simplifications. So basically you have your UI, it uses navigator, and then you have a bunch of views, and that's your whole application, right? Good. So what you do is you need to start with something small, but also you need to kind of break things. So I would recommend break things, but just taking one simple view that you have, migrate that one, just add a Vaadin 14 at root annotation on it, so then it can work kind of standalone from a UI point of view. Probably you will need to do some other surrounding things also, but really start with just one small thing, get that one migrated. But also, as you see right now, the application is broken because we have kind of two separate applications, so you're not done yet. You cannot go to production with this. Once you have one view done, then you're ready for the next step, which is to take your UI and instead change that into a Vaadin 14 main layout. And while you're working with that one again, because most likely you have quite much stuff there, you have like your main menu, you have some sidebars, you have all these surrounding things that are not part of any specific view, and those probably will require some kind of messing about also. But again, you can take this main layout and just, yes, you leave a hole for the actual view there, but you do all the other parts. You can then again just pop a root annotation on this one and use it kind of as a standalone thing. And then when you have those two parts done, then you're ready to actually connect them. So you take your main layout and actually use it as a router layout, configure your view 1 to actually be rendered inside that one, and then with that you have then you have done the hard part. Then it's just to repeat the same thing, take like one view at a time, migrate it, and on you go. So in that way, that's kind of the really high level approach for how I recommend you do things. But now for something completely different, I will do this to actually show all the low level details. So I have taken our old Vaadin, like Vaadin 6, 7, 8 era tutorial app, which is just a CRM system, basically just a list of contacts and you can edit them. And I will migrate that one for you right here, right now. So here we have the application. It's really simple, as I said. We can filter here, so something like that. Yes, we could find that contact. We can open it, we can edit something. This is Elvis C, of course, saving, and yes, it's saved there, and basically that's all there is in this really simple application, but it still shows very many important concepts. So what we need to do when migrating, no, I don't want updates Eclipse, thank you. We always start, of course, with POM XML, or if you're using Gradle, then you start with that. And looks really easy. Vaadin version, let's just update it. 14.0.12, actually 13 was out 2 days ago, but I'm not brave enough to test that one right now. But we get some red. We get some red because we have not only changed the version number, but also what kind of Maven artifacts we have. So actually, we can simplify things. We don't need anything else than Vaadin core, which contains all the open source parts of Vaadin. There's also just a Vaadin without the dash core, which contains everything, but I will just keep it a little bit more smooth here. And in a real migration, you would also copy paste Vaadin Maven plugin configuration. I won't live code that one for you, and in really simple cases it works without it, but you should really know what you're doing if you don't do it. And then of course now I changed what we have on the class path. I have lots of red in my editor, and the projector almost shows it as red also. Before I forget it, I will remove the servlet definition because we don't need that one in Vaadin 10 and newer. Servlet is always updated automatically, deployed automatically. But actually, I will follow my advice, so I will just ignore this UI for now. And let's just start with this form class, which is this right-hand side for editing things. And what I'm going to do is I will remove all the old imports. We also, for reasons that I will come back to, moved everything to new package names. So it's kind of easy. You can remove all your imports, and then you just need to find new imports, and then you're almost done. So the first problem, form layout. There is a form layout also in Vaadin 14, but it's more sophisticated. It has like multi-column setups and all these kinds of stuff. I won't go into that right now, so I will just do a vertical layout instead. Import vertical layout, text field, just the same but with a different import. Native select is actually something that nobody has gotten around to implementing. I think it's so easy, so nobody has even like thought about it, but that's kind of missing, but combo box is always a good replacement. Import that one, also call the combo box constructor. Date field is the same except that it's called date picker nowadays. And we need to import it. Button is button, yes. Let's remove the main UI reference for now. Binder stays exactly the same, almost kind of having even the same bugs because that's almost an exact copy, and we keep those actually up to date also between 8 and the latest, so 14 for now. And then let's get rid of some more main UI references for now. Horizontal layout now, no updates there. As you saw, add components is just add nowadays, huge simplification. Save button set style name, we don't even have a theme called Valo anymore. Instead we do save.add theme variants and choose a button variant which is Lumo primary. Lumo is the name of the new theme. Set click shortcut is instead add click shortcut because of course you can have many click shortcuts, and it's key.enter in this case, and no modifiers. And we are almost done except that text field doesn't have a select all, but we can do almost the same with focus. And now, okay, I need to comment out this main UI because we killed the main UI. There we have one. Oh, I just missed a character here. So now we're almost done. I will just, as I said, add a root annotation here. Oh, I need to import it also. And then I will start the server again and hope everything is working. There should be an error there, it's fine. It started, so surely it's okay. So if I refresh, I get what I expect, which is saying that, well, there isn't any view mapped to just slash, but there is one. This is, by the way, only showed in, it's not shown in production mode, so you can have almost secret views if you want. But slash customer form, this is a bit small, sorry about that, but that one works. And yes, we see that here we have now the same thing as Vaadin 14. We can, for instance, see that, yes, here we have the really nice date picker that I bragged about. So let's continue coding. Let's also fix the main UI. Let's actually put back all the references that I commented out about that one. There we go. And then main UI, comment everything back. Again, the same trick, just remove all the com.vaadin imports. UI is something we don't want to use anymore. If you really, really want to, you can still use UI, but preferably not. You should instead define a main layout and put all your kind of global logic in there, because the new router works better in that kind of setup. But here, what this UI is really, it's a vertical layout that we put stuff into. So we can just directly extend vertical layout, and also let's define now this as the main root of this application. And then we again do the same thing. Grid is, for simple purposes, it's the same. If you're doing more custom things, then you probably need to tweak stuff, but in this case I didn't need to do anything. Text field import, we don't have an init method. Instead we do all these things in the constructor. We don't need to create the layout because this is the layout. Value change mode lazy, just import from a different place. Then we have this clear button. Oh, I can't show it anymore. It was for the filter, just to clear what you have filtered there. So we create that one. We create a CSS layout to put it just next to the filter text and so on. I can mention the CSS layout. Nowadays it's just called div, because that's technically what it is in the browser. So nothing fancy there. But in this case we don't need any of this, because the Vaadin 14 text field has a set clear button visible true. So we don't even need to do anything about that. Again, import button, import horizontal layout. Instead of setting the filtering CSS layout, we just set the filter text there. Set expand ratio is nowadays just expand. Which one were we expanding? The grid, I guess. Yes. Expand grid, and then I actually need to do set size full for myself here also. And instead of adding those to the layout, I just add them to this, no set content, and I think we are done. So let's redeploy. Done. Oh, shouldn't navigate to customer for, we should navigate to the root. So here we have now the same application but migrated to Vaadin 14. I can still filter. We have this nice clear button in the text field. I can open something, I can edit it, save. All those things work. So yay, I did it. So what happened here? Lots of things were completely reused. Like the overall architecture, the structure, we have still the same classes, they have the same roles. The programming model is exactly the same, of course. You have a button, you add a click listener to it, you have a text field, you get the value from it. All those things are exactly the same. Again, the structure of the code, like initializing things, adding listeners, exactly the same. All your backend logic, basically, or your data binding, as I said, like binder is the same. Data provider that we also added in Vaadin 8, it's exactly the same. All those things don't change at all. Again, since I call myself an architect, I can make simplifications. If you are doing a really by the book MVP pattern, then V is the only part you need to change. In practice, probably not, but that's kind of the theory. But then we also had to redo a bunch of things, and with a bigger application, there's more things there also. First off, we needed to change the build. Not just update the version number, but actually change what artifacts we have, update to use a different Vaadin Maven plugin with different configuration. In simple cases, it just works, but in practice, you kind of want and need it to manage the front-end dependencies. So basically take all the web components, download them from the web component npm registry, build them together, produce a version of all those that even Internet Explorer 11 can understand, minify them so that it's not like hundreds of small files to download because that's really slow, but instead just one file that is doesn't have any white space or comments and so on. All those things will be taken care of for you by the Maven plugin. Another thing where we have, on a detail level, a bunch of changes that you need to take into account is with individual components. In general, kind of naming and concepts, we have slightly aligned better with what things are called on the web. So for instance, I named it here also in the middle, label on the web, like the label tag, that's something that should only use together with input fields, and it should be so that when you click the label, then it actually focuses the input field. Whereas Vaadin 6, 7, 8 label component, that's just anything with text. But for that instead, you can, for instance, use the span component, which then uses a span element in the browser, which is more appropriate for those kinds of purposes, just like put any text there. Another big change is if you want to do templating. Anyone using custom layout from older Vaadins? Yeah, it's not very popular, but a few use it. So what it does is that it lets you write kind of the layout structure in HTML, and then you can just put your kind of living components inside there. For that, one of the big changes in Vaadin 10 and also carrying over to 14 and future is Polymer template, which gives you much more flexibility there, but you can still also use it for exactly the same purpose, just kind of define an HTML structure and have some holes where you can put in your components. Custom component is nowadays named composite, and it's improved so that it doesn't add that extra div in the DOM structure. CSS layout I mentioned, label I mentioned. Bunch of components there are. If you know anything about HTML and the web, then it's kind of trivial how you do things just with native web features. For things like absolute layout, it's just one line of CSS per component basically. Panel for scrolling, actually that one we will create a Java component for also, and so on. And then some components are still missing, like slider for instance. We haven't yet made a Vaadin 14 version of slider. There are some third-party alternatives but not official Vaadin version. Those will probably eventually be added gradually. Again, slider wasn't, probably someone is missing, or definitely someone is missing it, but quite many applications manage without also. Then kind of mixed bag, random things. Your own add-ons, especially if they're using GWT, so any Java that is compiled to JavaScript, those will need some redoing. There are a couple of different approaches there. I won't go into those now because that's another 2 hours of presenting. But just ask me and I can give you some pointers later on. When you're updating, you should take into account that we have, well, if you update from 7, please remember that nowadays we require Java 8. We require Servlet 3.1, whereas Vaadin 8 all required 3.0. You need to update to Spring 4, 5, I don't remember the numbers, but you need to update Spring if you haven't already done it. Spring Boot 2 at least is something that you must have, whereas Vaadin 8 works with both Spring Boot 1 and Spring Boot 2. Theme, you probably need to redo a bunch of things there because we, again, same thing, use more modern web features. So we're using CSS variables, CSS custom properties instead of a pre-compiler. So actually now things are those variables are evaluated in the browser, which much smoother. But of course, if you have tens of thousands of lines of SAS code, then you might have some problems. And then also, as I showed you, the navigation with router instead of navigator, that's also one thing that kind of needs some rethinking, but hopefully not that big of a problem. Specifically for the components, I can also mention that if you go to vaadin.com/docs and then somewhere there deep down migrating and components in Vaadin platform, you will find a matrix of like what is the or is there a corresponding component from Vaadin 8 also in Vaadin 10 or newer, and we try to keep that one up to date also. So there you will find kind of what would be the replacement for all the built-in components. So that was Big Bang migration. You just start and then you get it done, and you have to deal with all the changes at once, because once you start, you really have to kind of break your application, unless of course you keep a separate copy and so on. But mentally, you cannot publish, deploy the new version until you have done it all. That's why it's a big bang. Then another alternative is to instead do all these things incrementally, which again has its pros and its cons. We created again, from an engineering point of view, a really fancy thing called multi-platform runtime that helps you do this. The thing is that we don't recommend it for, so to say, regular applications, only for really huge ones, because you will have some overhead and so on. And that's also one of the reasons that we said that you actually need a Prime subscription to use this tool. One other thing you need to do is that you need to update your old application to a relatively new Vaadin version. So if you're still on 7, then it's 7.7.14 or newer. That was also the last public version, if I remember right. After that, we have also done again for the extended support customers. And then Vaadin 8, so Vaadin 8.6 is the oldest version that still has all the integration points that we need to actually be able to do this integration. And what this gives you, as I said, is a way of migrating incrementally. So here we again have the same Vaadin 8 application with a UI, with a navigator, and with a couple of views. And the way the multi-platform runtimes works is that you can have a Vaadin 14 application, and inside it you can put any Vaadin 7 or 8 component, kind of embed it right there, and everything works seamlessly. So what we can do here for migrating, we always need to have kind of Vaadin 14 as the top level thing. So we need to add just a dummy layout. It's just an empty div basically, and then inside it we change our UI class to, I don't remember the name, but we have a class that kind of emulates UI for you while you are emulates Vaadin 8 UI for you while you're migrating, and it also has kind of emulating navigator stuff through router and so on. So in that way, we still, even though this is now a Vaadin 8 application, Vaadin 10 application, Vaadin 14 application, come on, Vaadin 14 application from a top level, kind of you're using Vaadin 14 navigator, but from Vaadin 14's point of view, it's only one big view, and then the contents of that view is managed by Vaadin 8. Then the next thing you can do is to actually migrate again your main layout, your main menu, your sidebars, all those things. Keep everything else the same. There again, then you would take your navigator class, say this is, or the class that manage the Vaadin 8 navigator, say that this is now the only view in this application, and it's rendered inside the root layout, which is a router layout. And again, use the bridge navigator there. And then when you have gotten this far, then you can take view by view, migrate just that one view. Everything else stays the same. You can still, I mean, this is a whole application. There's no broken lines. You can take this to production if you want to, because everything is still somehow attached to it. It's just that some views are actually kind of native Vaadin 14 views. Other views just kind of fall back to this navigator view that then internally uses the Vaadin 8 navigator to show the right Vaadin 8 view. Everything inside the top level main layout. You can keep doing that with one view after the other. And one thing you can also use is that if you want to get rid of that navigator part, you can also use an MPR root adapter. That's kind of, it's a Vaadin 14 component. You can add as root to it, but it emulates navigator from the outside. So your view implementation still believes that it's used from navigator. It gets all the same events and so on, but it's actually like we're just fooling it basically. So in that way you can also kind of make everything be native Vaadin 14 root, so that you can use URL parameters and have just use classes when referencing, like where should we navigate and all those kinds of things, but still not migrate it. But then you can also, of course, eventually, if you want to, you can keep using that kind of structure for a long time also, but eventually then you have step by step migrated everything. So now we only have Vaadin 14 parts in the application, and then we are done. And just again to show you that I'm not fooling you, I'm also going to do this trick for the same demo application we had. So I will stop the server for now. I will cheat a little bit, jump to another commit here, because there's a bit of bookkeeping in the pom.xml file that I didn't want to keep doing. So what we have here now in pom.xml is both a Vaadin version, that's kind of the new Vaadin 14 something, and then a framework version, because Vaadin 8 was also called Vaadin framework, so that's why I used that terminology here. We are using the Vaadin 14 BOM. We are using Vaadin core from Vaadin 14. And then we have the same Vaadin server, Vaadin push, Vaadin client compile, Vaadin themes, and so on dependencies that you would have in your Vaadin in your old application. But here we need to explicitly define the version number because we're using the BOM from 14. Then we have MPR, multi-platform runtime. There's one version for Vaadin 7 and one version for Vaadin 8. You need to choose the right one there. And then finally, we also use Vaadin 8 version of the Vaadin Maven plugin, because we need to compile a widget set here. You also, of course, need a Vaadin 14 Maven plugin, and for that it's also available as Flow Maven plugin and not only Vaadin Maven plugin. So you just define a different name and actually also a separate version number. All this is defined in the documentation also. But with that done, we have kind of updated the POM XML, and then this is a little bit small, sorry about that also. What I also have here now is that I have the Vaadin 8 application and the Vaadin 10 application, the migrated one, side by side. And what I'm going to do is that from the Vaadin 8 application I will remove the main UI, and from the Vaadin 10 application I will remove the migrated form. Delete those. So what happens now is, of course, that we have a bunch of compile errors because customer form, this is the Vaadin 14 part, and it doesn't find a customer form because it's in a different Java package. So I need to import that one, and I need to do the same here also, I guess. Yes, it doesn't find main UI. I will import the Vaadin 10 main UI here, and then here in main UI now I will have one compilation error because here into this horizontal layout, this is a Vaadin 14 horizontal layout. I had a Vaadin 14 grid into it, but then this form is a Vaadin 8 component, and that's not something that the compiler likes because, again, they are different base classes. So what I need to do here, the only thing in this simple example is that I need to do new legacy wrapper, and then I give my form to that one, and with that simple change we should now have a actually working application. And as we see, we're compiling a Vaadin 8 widget set, because what the multi-platform runtime does is that it takes a Vaadin 8 part and, for instance, disables all the communication and instead directs that through the Vaadin 14 communication layer. It takes all things like get current UI events, all those things. It kind of just emulates and makes it so that the Vaadin 8 application believes that, well, from its point of view, it's still running in Vaadin 8, but in fact, lots of things are redirected and made so that everything works together. So now, with this server restarted, we can see that left-hand side, that's a Vaadin 8 form, Vaadin 10 form, but then form grid. But then on the right-hand side, we now have a Vaadin 8 form with, for instance, the old date picker, and I can still save things. Let's actually save something that you can see. Save this, and then it updates the Vaadin 10 part. So these things are really kind of smoothly integrated together. Of course, well, okay, this projector isn't colorful enough, but on my screen I see that the form actually has a slightly different background color, so the themes are not matching, but technically everything fits together. So that's kind of what you can do with the multi-platform runtime. It really lets you embed a 7 or 8 component anywhere you want. And just that requires a little bit of imagination, like how you put things together, but it allows you to do almost anything. It takes care of sharing the communication, sharing, for instance, locking between, like session locking, all the different get current things, all those things are kept in sync automatically for you. There's integration for the navigation so that you can, again, keep using Navigator for some parts and the new router for other parts. Because you are using Spring or CDI, in that case you should start using the Vaadin 14 Spring and CDI thing, and their things will again just magically work because, for instance, UI scoped in Vaadin 8 Spring is basically just based on UI get current, and because we're emulating UI get current for Vaadin 8, it also means that the UI scope works. So there's basically everything just works there also. But you should remember that you should use the Vaadin 14 version of either the Spring or the CDI integrations. So what this allowed us to do is to do things step by step. We don't need to care about, like, is this component now exactly the same? Because we can keep using the old components. We can have old grid in all our views still just by adding it in legacy wrappers. We don't need to care about migrating all our add-ons or custom GUID widgets because, again, we can just keep using them for now. Navigation the same also. We can just mix and match. But we also get a couple of extra things that we need to take care of. One is to keep the theme implementations in parallel. The other thing is, of course, if you want to go to production, then probably you want to do some testing. Hopefully, right? Good. Sometimes, yeah. So, I mean, yes, you can incrementally update step by step, but still every time you want to publish that to production, probably there's some overhead because you want to verify that, yes, things actually still work in a good way. So from that point of view, there is overhead. You will, I don't know, spend like, all in all, spend maybe 10 or 20% more time doing the actual work because there's more work to do because you need to take care of these other things. But the thing you get for that is that you can do things step by step, which probably you as an engineer might not be that excited, but your project manager might be. So again, for huge application, consider this. If you don't have a really huge, like hundreds of views, then probably in the long run, it might be better to just do it once in a big bang kind of way. But you can do it incrementally if you want, and that's basically it.